I need $500,000 by Friday, my daughter said, sliding gambling receipts across the table like I was a bank clerk. That sentence tells you everything you need to know about the problem I was facing at 68 years old. Not illness, not debt, not loneliness after my husband died. My problem was my own child and the man she chose to defend. My name is Cassandra Miller. I am a widow, a grandmother, and a retired nurse who spent 4 decades learning how to recognize symptoms before a body collapses. That night, sitting in my kitchen in Gainesville, Florida, I recognized the symptom immediately. Moral failure disguised as desperation. Angela sat stiffly across from me, her back straight, jaw set, eyes already hard. She didn't look like a woman asking for help. She looked like a woman preparing for a fight. Her husband, Tyrone, hadn't even bothered to join us at the table. He sprawled in my living room, feet up on my recliner, scrolling through his phone like he was waiting for room service. "I'm not paying for gambling," I said quietly, pushing the receipts back toward her. Angela's eyes flashed. "It's not gambling. Tyrone had a system. He was investing." "That money went to casinos," I replied, "and sports books, and offshore accounts. I've seen the statements." She stood up so fast her chair scraped the tile. "You don't understand how this works, Mom. You've never understood him." I looked past her, toward the living room. Tyrone didn't even look up. He smirked. "Sit down," Angela snapped at me, as if I were the child. "We don't have time for lectures." That was when I felt something inside me tighten. I had paid for Angela's college tuition when her friends took out loans. I paid for her wedding when she insisted on a venue that cost more than my first house. I co-signed their mortgage when Tyrone's credit was too damaged to qualify. I paid my grandchildren's tuition directly because I didn't trust their parents to do it. I told myself I was protecting my family. What I was really doing was teaching them there would always be someone else to clean up the mess. "I will not fund addiction," I said, "and I will not reward threats." Angela laughed. A short, sharp sound that didn't belong to the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. "You think this is about addiction? This is about survival." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Tyrone owes dangerous people, real people. If this doesn't get paid, they won't come after him. They'll come after the kids." The room went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What did you just say?" Her expression didn't soften. "Don't make me spell it out. You know how this works. They take collateral, leverage, and children are effective." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I saw Michael's gap-toothed smile, Sasha's braids bouncing when she ran toward me at school pickup. My hands trembled, just slightly. "You would let someone threaten your own children?" I whispered. Angela's eyes filled, but her voice stayed firm. "I would do whatever it takes to protect my family, just like you always said." From the living room, Tyrone finally spoke. "She's right. This gets ugly if it drags on. You've got the resources to make it go away." I stood there, staring at my daughter, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the child I raised, the one who cried when her goldfish died, the one who used to write me notes that said, "Mommy, you're my safe place." Angela reached for the glass of water I'd poured earlier, and in one sharp motion, threw it at me. Cold splashed down my blouse, soaking through to my skin. "Get it together," she said, her voice flat. "Stop acting shocked. You'll have the money ready, Friday, early." Water dripped onto the floor between us. I didn't move. That was the moment something broke and something else hardened. I thought of every time Angela called with an emergency, every time she promised it was the last request, every time Tyrone avoided my eyes while signing another promissory note. I thought of my late husband warning me, years ago, that love without limits turns into permission. I bent down, picked up a towel, and calmly dried my hands. "You're right," I said softly. "This isn't the time for arguments." Angela blinked, surprised by the shift. Tyrone lifted his head, suddenly attentive. "I'll take care of it," I continued. "I need a couple of days to move things around." Relief washed over her face so fast it made my stomach turn. "I knew you'd come through." Tyrone stood, walked to my liquor cabinet without asking, and poured himself a heavy glass of my late husband's bourbon, the bottle we saved for anniversaries. He drank it like it was nothing. "Smart choice," he said. "Friday." Angela grabbed her purse and moved toward me, arms opening for a hug. I stepped aside. She didn't comment. She was already thinking about the money. At the door, Tyrone added, almost casually, "And don't talk to anyone. People get nervous when they think someone's running." The door closed. Their car pulled away. I stood alone in my kitchen, soaked, shaking not from fear, but from clarity. I walked into my study and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was the folder I had been adding to for years without admitting why. Every check, every wire transfer, every broken promise, and a separate file with Tyrone's name on it, photos, dates, casino records, surveillance stills from the private investigator I hired 6 months earlier when my instincts finally outweighed my denial. I picked up the phone and called my attorney. "Richard," I said when he answered, "my daughter just threatened her own children to protect her husband." There was a long pause. "What do you want to do?" I looked around the house at the family photos, the piano my husband used to play, the walls that had absorbed decades of forgiveness. "I'm going to disappear," I said. "And when I'm done, that man will never threaten my grandchildren again." That night, I agreed to give them the money. And that was the first lie I told to save my family. If you felt that moment in your chest, like I did, living it like this video, and tell me where you're watching from. You might be closer than you think. The morning after they left, I rose before the sun. I hadn't slept, not really. My eyes had closed, but my mind hadn't stopped spinning. Tyrone's words echoed louder in the dark. "Don't talk to anyone. People get nervous when they think someone's running." As if he hadn't just threatened my grandchildren. I brewed coffee, black and strong, the way my late husband, Robert, used to drink it. I poured it into the chipped mug he'd bought me on our 30th anniversary trip to Charleston. "World's best mom," it said in fading script. I stared at those words for a long time. I'd believed them once. The house was still, silent, but my heart beat loud in my chest, steady and certain. I wasn't going to be part of their blackmail. Not this time. Not ever again. At 6:30 a.m., I called Richard again. He didn't sound surprised to hear from me. "Is it bad?" he asked, voice groggy but alert. "It's worse," I replied. "She said they'd come after the kids if I didn't pay." There was a pause. I could almost hear him rubbing his temples. "They won't," he said. "Not if we move fast. Listen, Cass, I've already started on your contingency. You want me to push the button?" "Yes. Everything we talked about. Sell the second property, liquidate the CD, but don't transfer anything to them. And Richard?" "Yes?" "Start gathering every legal document that can protect my grandchildren from their parents. I don't care what it takes. If we have to go to war, we go to war." He exhaled slowly. "Understood." I hung up and walked into the guest bedroom, which I hadn't used since Robert passed. That's where I kept the fireproof safe. Inside it were the original copies of Angela and Tyrone's wedding prenup, the home deed, the children's trust, my living will. Every file was labeled in my late husband's handwriting, neat and small. He had warned me about Tyrone years ago, said he saw a manipulator in that man's eyes. I didn't want to believe it then. I do now. By noon, I'd made 3 more calls. First to my private investigator, a retired cop named Lyle who worked quietly and fast. I asked him to double-check Tyrone's gambling contacts, names, places, affiliations. If there really were dangerous people involved, I wanted to know who. And if there weren't, I wanted proof that this was just another scare tactic. Second call, to my former colleague at the Department of Children and Families. I didn't make any formal claims, not yet. I just asked a few questions, theoretical, about guardianship. What if a grandparent suspected a threat? What options existed? Third call, to Carlos, the manager of my late husband's auto dealership. He had worked for us for 25 years, loyal, discreet, and trusted. I told him I might be gone for a while, and that I needed him to hold the fort. "Family stuff," he asked gently. "Something like that," I said. "You'll have full signing authority. I'll email the notarized power of attorney this afternoon." "Say no more, Mrs. Miller. Whatever you need." That night I cooked chicken and dumplings, the way Robert liked them. It felt like an act of grounding myself, remembering the woman I was before all of this. I ate slowly at the kitchen table, alone, with only the grandfather clock ticking behind me. When I finished, I poured the leftovers into a container and labeled it for Angela, out of old habit. Then I opened my laptop. I began compiling a file. I titled it simply, "The Cost." I scanned every receipt Angela had ever sent me, every Venmo transfer, every check she cashed. I pulled from bank statements, old emails, even handwritten notes she'd left me asking for just a little help this month. The total, conservatively, was over $600,000 across 15 years. I made a second folder for Tyrone: casino photos, surveillance stills from Lyle's stakeouts in Tampa and Biloxi, a photo of him at a blackjack table with a woman who wasn't my daughter, another of him handing off a duffel bag in the alley behind a strip mall. Lyle's notes included known associates, men with sealed records, ties to gangs in Jacksonville and Miami. Maybe she wasn't lying. Maybe Tyrone had really dragged them into something worse than debt. But that didn't make it my responsibility. It made it my duty to stop it. By 11 p.m., I had backed everything up on a USB drive and hidden it inside the lining of my suitcase. The next morning, I called the cabin rental agency in Asheville, North Carolina, a quiet lakeside place Robert and I had once stayed at during our first year of retirement. "I'd like to book the same cabin, starting this Wednesday," I said. "Of course, Miss Miller. For how long?" "I'll let you know when I'm done breathing." She chuckled gently. "We'll have it ready." I drove to the bank and emptied my safe deposit box. Birth certificates, bonds, the deed to the house, everything went into a second suitcase, along with framed photos of Michael and Sasha. I took only what I couldn't replace, left the rest behind. Material things didn't matter anymore. That afternoon, Angela texted me, "You getting the money ready?" "Don't mess around, Mom. You've got 2 days." I didn't reply. Instead, I walked into the garage and opened an old cardboard box labeled Christmas. Beneath the tinsel and garland was the small wooden jewelry box Robert gave me on our 20th anniversary. Inside, I kept letters he'd written me when we were younger. I took one out and read it. "You always see the best in people," he'd written, "but don't let your kindness be their excuse." I packed the letter. Then I sat down at my desk and began writing one of my own. It wasn't for Angela. It was for Michael and Sasha. A letter they wouldn't read for years, but one I needed them to have. I told them who I was, what I tried to do, how I failed their mother, but how I wouldn't fail them. That no matter what anyone said, they were never the debt. They were the future. I folded the letter and placed it inside a file labeled, "For my grandchildren, open at 18. The final thing I did that night was call Lyle again. "Follow Tyrone," I said. "Full surveillance, GPS tracker if you have to. I want to know where he sleeps, who he sees, what he hides. And if he ever comes within 50 feet of my grandchildren, I want photos, dated and time-stamped." "You planning to go to court?" he asked. "I'm planning to go to war," I replied. Tuesday passed quietly. I ignored Angela's calls. The silence was my answer. By the time she'd start to panic, I'd be gone. Wednesday morning, 4 a.m. I stood in my kitchen one last time. I brewed coffee. I looked out the window at the street where I used to push Angela in a stroller, where Robert used to rake leaves in the fall, where life had once been simpler, clearer. Then I locked the door, placed a sealed envelope on the table addressed to Angela inside, a copy of her prenup and a list of every payment I'd made in 15 years, and I walked out. The road was dark and quiet as I pulled away in my old Buick. In the rearview mirror, my porch light flickered once, then disappeared. I wasn't running. I was resetting the rules. And this time, I would not lose. 2 days after I disappeared, my phone started lighting up, texts, calls, voicemails from Angela. I didn't answer a single one. I left the phone on, not out of sentiment but strategy. I needed the trail, the timestamps. I needed to know exactly when the panic would set in. I was already in Asheville by then, tucked into the log cabin Robert and I had rented almost 15 years ago. It was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd grown too used to living in a house filled with things that didn't matter. The cabin had no dishwasher, no smart TV, no marble countertops. Just silence, trees, and the occasional rustle of deer through fallen leaves. It was perfect. I unpacked slowly, placing the essentials where I wanted them. Photos of the kids on the nightstand, Robert's old fishing hat on the coat hook by the door, and the USB drives in a locked drawer. Each item had a reason, a memory, a mission. That Friday at noon, I received a call from Lyle. "We've got movement," he said. "Tyrone's been in and out of a sports bar near Macon all week. Last night he met with a guy named Remy Sanchez. I ran his plate. Ties to a known bookmaker. And Cass? It's not good. I sat down on the edge of the cabin bed, heart steady. Tell me. He's asking around about how to access offshore accounts. Something tells me he thinks you're going to pay up, and he's already figured out how to hide it. I bit my lip. Let him believe that. You sure? Positive. That afternoon, I finalized everything with Richard. My will had already been updated, guardianship papers filed. A secondary trust had been created under my name for Michael and Sasha, separate from the original one Angela and Tyrone couldn't touch. This one would cover their education and basic needs, but only under my direct supervision or in the event of my death. Angela's name appeared nowhere on it. I also mailed a physical envelope to my sister Evelyn in Tennessee, someone I hadn't seen in years but trusted completely. She'd been a social worker for most of her life. The package included notarized emergency guardianship papers, just in case things turned violent before I returned. I'm not dying, I told Richard over the phone, but I'm also not naive. I know what Tyrone's capable of. Angela, though that still hurt. That wasn't just betrayal. That was something more intimate and deeply disappointing. On Saturday, she sent the first voicemail worth saving. I don't know what game you're playing, but this isn't funny. You said yes, remember? You said yes. Tyrone's trying to stay calm, but they're going to start asking questions soon. You're putting us all in danger. The kids too. The kids too. My hands shook, but not from fear, from fury. That night, I wrote the first page of my journal, something I hadn't done in years. I wrote it like a deposition. March 16th, Angela threatened me. Said if I didn't give them $500,000 by Friday, people would come for the children, my grandchildren. Her voice was calm when she said it, cold, like she was ordering lunch. Then she threw water at me and told me to have the money ready. I told her yes, but I was already planning to disappear. The next page, I started listing names, people I needed to contact, people I could trust, and those I couldn't. By Monday, Lyle had sent me photos, Tyrone pacing in front of my house, then pounding on the door. Angela was there too, checking under the doormat, peering through the window, calling out, "Mom, are you in there?" Like I hadn't vanished 2 days earlier. Lyle told me they returned 3 times that day, finally noticing the sealed envelope on the kitchen table. He had no way of knowing what was inside it, but I did. Copies of bank transfers, the prenup, a document showing the house deed under my name, and a printed screenshot of Tyrone's betting history from the last 6 months. All of it damning, all of it real. On Tuesday, Angela showed up at my dealership looking for Carlos. She was screaming before she made it through the door, he said on a call that evening, accusing us of theft, said you'd abandoned the family, that you were letting children suffer. We have it all on security footage. Anyone else see it? Customers, employees, the works. It's a mess. Good, I said. He paused. Good? Carlos, if she wants a public war, let her start one. Just keep documenting everything. I'll handle the rest. That night, I went for a walk along the lake behind the cabin. The moonlight on the water reminded me of simpler times, birthday parties in the backyard, Robert building snowmen with Angela when she was 7, me stitching her Halloween costumes by hand. How did we get here? When I returned to the cabin, my inbox had a message from Evelyn. She had received the package. You're doing the right thing, she wrote, and if it comes to it, I'll be ready. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept picturing Tyrone's face, how smug he looked sitting in my recliner, how comfortable he was threatening me, how little he regarded me as a person, just a wallet with a pulse. On Wednesday morning, I checked my camera feed from the house. Angela was back. Alone this time, no makeup, no designer handbag, her shoulders hunched. She found the envelope. She opened it. She didn't even make it to the second page before collapsing onto the porch in sobs. I watched her cry for 20 minutes, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pain, just distance. I turned off the feed. Angela would soon learn what it felt like to stand on her own, to look at consequences instead of cushions. And I would continue building the case, brick by brick, for whatever came next. Because this wasn't just about refusing to pay. It was about rewriting the rules. About what happens when the bank finally says, account closed. By Thursday, the silence was no longer strategic. It was armor. Angela hadn't called since her breakdown on my porch. The The voicemails stopped. The texts dried up. Not because she understood, I knew that much, but because the panic had turned into planning. Tyrone was up to something. Lyle confirmed it. "He's been sniffing around a guy named Vincent Cortez," Lyle said over the phone, his voice low. "Not a good sign. Cortez has a record loan sharking, extortion, a disappearance back in '08 that no one could ever pin on him." My chest tightened. "Are the kids in danger?" "Not yet. But you were right. Tyrone's desperate." I stood at the cabin sink, staring out at the tree line. The air in Asheville was cooler now, early spring nipping at the edges of morning. In Phoenix, it would already be hitting the high 80s. My garden would be blooming. The grapefruit tree Robert had planted when Angela was born would be heavy with fruit. And my daughter? My only child? Plotting with criminals. I knew what I had to do next. I opened the folder labeled History, a paper trail of Tyrone's gambling debts, false business ventures, and old arrest records. Then I pulled out the backup USB drive Lyle had compiled. Security camera footage from family holidays. Christmas Eve 2 years ago, Tyrone drunkenly muttering to Angela, "Your dad's soft, always folds." The 4th of July last year at my lake house, Tyrone bragging about how much the old man was worth if you added it all up. Hell, we could live off his interest alone. I watched it all. Not with anger, with focus. Then I emailed the files, every video, every spreadsheet, every receipt to a secure online drive shared with my lawyer, my bank, and 2 people in law enforcement. My old friend Lena, now a deputy in Maricopa County, and her husband, a forensic accountant. They'd seen these kinds of schemes before, manipulation by loved ones that slowly turned criminal. Elder financial abuse was what the law called it. They called it theft, with a smile. Lena texted me after reviewing the files. "This is more than enough to open an investigation. Do you want us to move forward?" I paused. Not because I had doubts, but because the decision wasn't about legality. It was about legacy. Was I ready to let Angela's name appear on court documents, to admit to the world that my daughter, my baby, had turned into someone capable of this? The next morning, I saw the answer. A voicemail, this time from Tyrone. "Hey, Cass. We're all adults here. No reason to make this harder than it needs to be. You help us out. This whole thing goes away. You stay out here in the woods. Well, people get curious. Banks, schools, police. Your grandkids could end up in the system, you know?" He was threatening to use the foster care system as leverage. My hand clenched the phone so tightly I thought it would snap. I played the voicemail again. Then I sent it to Lena. "Yes, proceed." That same day, I visited the town post office and shipped a manila envelope back to Phoenix return address. None. Inside was a single sheet of paper addressed to Angela. "Angela, the money is gone. The safety net you abused, the father you used like a credit line, the comfort you traded for silence, it's all gone now. I am not running. I am removing myself from your reach. You have a choice. Cut ties with Tyrone and reclaim your life, or follow him down the path he's carving with police, judges, and shame at the end of it. I've left you nothing but truth. It's more valuable than anything you ever asked for." I mailed it and walked back through the pine trees, every step lighter than the one before. When I returned to the cabin, there was a call waiting from Evelyn. "She called me," Evelyn said. "Angela," crying. "What did she say?" "She begged me to tell her where you were. Said you abandoned her, that you were losing your mind." I let out a soft laugh. "Of course she did. I told her the truth," Evelyn said. "That you were safe, that you were angry, that maybe for the first time in her life, you were putting yourself first." Silence passed between us for a moment, like a mutual exhale after years of holding in the same breath. "I have one more thing to ask," I said. "I need you to be willing to take the kids. If Tyrone gets arrested." Evelyn didn't hesitate. "Of course, you know I will." I went to sleep that night with a different kind of heaviness, not grief, but preparation, the kind that comes before a storm you no longer fear because you've already fortified the walls. By the following Monday, Lena called again. "Cass," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "We have enough. Tyrone's in violation of his probation from 2015. The fake LLCs, the wire fraud he's toast. We're preparing the arrest warrant now. It'll hit within 48 hours. And Angela, She's listed as a person of interest but not charged. Yet, if she's smart, she'll cooperate. I thanked Lena and hung up. Then I made one last call. To Carlos. Clear my schedule for the next 3 weeks, I said. No public appearances, no dealership board meetings. Tell them I'm handling family matters. Carlos didn't ask questions. He never did. The final move had already begun. The knock on Angela's door came at 6:42 a.m., just as the sun cast long golden streaks across the Phoenix skyline. She was still in her robe, half asleep, when 2 uniformed officers and a plainclothes detective stepped into view. Lyle had sent me the footage. Ring camera, clear as day. Tyrone opened the door with a smirk that vanished as the cuffs clicked shut. Warrant for arrest, the officer announced. Charges include wire fraud, identity theft, violation of probation, and elder financial abuse. Angela screamed his name, grabbing for his arm as they led him down the front steps, barefoot, unshaven, cursing. She wasn't arrested. Not yet. But the detectives entered the house with a second warrant, this one for the safe in their master bedroom closet. Inside, they found more than they'd expected. Fake IDs, burner phones, a black notebook filled with names and dollar amounts, and a stack of printed photos. Of me. Some taken without my knowledge. One from when I picked up the twins from ballet. One from outside Evelyn's house. Angela hadn't known about those. That much was clear from the video of her reaction, her hand covering her mouth, her knees buckling. That day, I stayed by the cabin phone. I didn't leave for the lake. I didn't tend to the tomatoes outside. I sat in the kitchen with a mug of black coffee, waiting. At 2:11 p.m., it rang. Mom. Angela's voice cracked, dry and trembling. They took him. They took Tyrone. I know, I said, calm, like I'd rehearsed it, because I had. They said there's a case against me too. They said I knew Mom. I didn't know. Not all of it. I swear I didn't know he was taking pictures of you, following you. But you knew about the money. Silence. You knew about the threats, I added. You knew what kind of people he was borrowing from. Please, she whispered. I didn't want it to get this far. He said he had a plan. That once we paid off the debts, he'd turn it all around. I let the silence hang. Let her sit in the consequences. The kids, she said finally. What about the kids? They're already at Evelyn's, I replied. I arranged it with her 3 days ago. They'll be safe. Angela broke. Sobs tore through the receiver. Deep, guttural cries that shook her breath and turned her voice to gravel. I've lost everything. No, I said. You still have the truth, and you still have time to decide who you want to become on the other side of this. I don't know how, she whispered. Then you start by sitting with what you've done, and when you're ready you apologize. Not just to me, to everyone you lied to, starting with yourself. The line stayed open. Neither of us spoke. Her breathing settled. My coffee went cold. Mom, she said, quieter now. Are you ever coming home? I don't know yet. Click. The following week unfolded like a reckoning. News broke across local media. Scottsdale man arrested in multi-state financial scam, followed by subheadings detailing the criminal charges, the victims, the sum of damages. Tyrone's face was plastered on the screen beside a photo of the dealership I'd founded 25 years ago. I called Carlos. Issue a statement. Full cooperation with law enforcement. Zero tolerance for unethical conduct. He handled it like a pro. Meanwhile, Lena confirmed that Angela would not be charged under the condition that she testify and surrender any remaining assets acquired through Tyrone's fraud. She agreed. She didn't have a choice. The luxury cars? Gone. The house? Seized under civil forfeiture laws. Her name in the community? Tarnished. But her children? Still hers. Still reachable. Evelyn brought them to see her the following Sunday. Angela had moved into a temporary housing facility, nothing more than a room with 2 twin beds, a microwave, and a shared hallway bathroom. No privacy, no comfort, just 4 beige walls and a second chance waiting to be earned. Sophie hugged her mother first. Michael stood back for a moment, uncertain, then stepped forward too. According to Evelyn, Angela didn't cry. She held them like oxygen. That same evening, Evelyn called me from her car. She's broken, Cass. But humble. Maybe for the first time. Then there's hope, I said, watching dusk descend over the mountain ridge outside the cabin. "And you?" Evelyn asked. "Are you okay?" "I'm grieving," I replied. "Not just the daughter I lost, but the woman I failed to raise." Evelyn was quiet. Then, "You didn't fail her. You just stopped rescuing her." That night, I pulled out the last letter Robert ever wrote me. He'd left it tucked in the back of his old Bible, a place I'd rarely touched since his passing. "Cass, if you're reading this, it means the time has come to let go. You can't save someone who clings to the edge of a lie. You can only offer them your truth and step back. The rest is up to them." I closed the letter. Angela had begun her fall. Whether she would rise was no longer my responsibility. But I would watch, from a distance, with eyes that no longer hoped but waited. The following morning, I stood at the cabin window, watching the fog lift off the surface of Flathead Lake like smoke rising from an extinguished fire. A trout leapt once, then vanished into the still water. Everything looked calm. But inside me, a war still raged. I hadn't spoken to Angela since the call. I needed space. She needed silence. But the children, Sophie and Michael, remained my compass. And today, I had work to do for them. By noon, I'd driven into Kalispell and stepped into the quiet offices of First Horizon Trust. Lena had helped me coordinate it all: the emergency educational fund, the restricted housing allowance, and the final revision to the grandchildren's trust. None of this was new. I'd been preparing for the worst long before Tyrone's arrest. But today, I made one final adjustment. "Add a clause," I told the estate officer. "If their mother maintains steady employment for 18 consecutive months, verifiable W-2 income, and attends counseling, then she's eligible to become co-trustee." The woman looked up, blinking. "That's generous. That's parenting," I said. "Even when it hurts." Later that afternoon, I mailed a letter not to Angela, but to Sophie and Michael, handwritten on thick, cream-colored paper, the kind Robert used for board correspondence. I told them I was proud of how brave they were, and how soon I'd visit. I included photos of the lake and the cabin's porch swing. And I reminded them that no matter what changed, Grandpa would never stop loving them. I sealed it with a wax stamp Robert had carved decades ago, his initials entwined with a pine tree. It was the kind of thing my grandchildren might forget one day, but maybe not. Maybe it would live in a shoebox under their bed. Maybe, when the world felt like too much, they'd open it and remember someone once believed in their future, even when everything else had fallen apart. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Lena. "She's working," Lena said. "Angela, she got a job." "Where?" "Community thrift store, south side of Tempe. It's through a transitional employment program, 15 hours a week, minimum wage. But it's something." I paused. "Is she showing up on time?" "Every day." "And the counseling?" "Started last week. Her caseworker confirmed it. She hasn't missed a session." I exhaled slowly, pressing my palm to my chest. There was still pain there, a tightness that hadn't loosened in months, but beneath it a flicker, maybe even forgiveness. Not yet, but maybe. That night, I sat by the fireplace and pulled out my journal. Not the one I used for notes and numbers, but the one I kept hidden, the one where I wrote things I couldn't say out loud. She's not ready, but she's trying, and I want to believe that's enough. For now. "Robert, if you can hear me, if you're watching, I think maybe we're not done yet. I think the story isn't over. I'm scared, but I'm listening, and I'm waiting." I closed the journal and sat in silence, letting the warmth of the fire soak into my bones. A week passed, then another. On a Tuesday morning in mid-September, my landline rang again. It was Carlos. "Hey boss," he said. "Got something you'll want to see." He texted me a video link from a local news segment. I clicked it. There she was, Angela, on camera. No makeup, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, standing beside a cart full of donated clothes at the thrift store. The reporter was covering a piece on second chances, how formerly incarcerated individuals and families affected by white-collar crimes were rebuilding their lives through community programs. Angela didn't speak much, just a few lines, but they hit hard. "I made mistakes," she said, "big ones, ones that hurt people I love. But I'm showing up now, every day. That's all I can do." The anchor wrapped the story with a soft nod. "Sometimes healing starts at the register, one folded sweater at a time." My throat tightened. Carlos had included one more thing in his message: a photo. Angela with Sophie and Michael standing outside the store, arms wrapped around each other. They were all smiling. It wasn't forced. It wasn't for show. I'd spent so long waiting for her to become someone better. But maybe, just maybe, I'd forgotten that healing doesn't look like triumph. Sometimes it looks like work, like humility, like waking up and deciding not to give up. I didn't call her. Not yet. Instead, I sent a bouquet. Simple tulips. Yellow. No card. She'd know. A few days later, Evelyn called. She came by, she said. Angela. She didn't ask for anything. Just wanted to drop off some groceries for the kids and thank me. How did she seem? Tired, but clear, like the fog finally lifted. We hung up soon after, but I sat by the window long after the sun had dipped below the pines, thinking of the girl Angela used to be, the girl who danced barefoot in the kitchen with flour on her nose, begging for one more bedtime story. She was still in there, buried beneath years of disappointment and fear, but she was clawing her way back. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just watching. I was praying. I arrived back in Phoenix, in the soft light of early October. The desert air had lost its harshness, replacing its dry bite with something gentler, almost forgiving. I drove straight from the airport in a modest rental, a silver sedan that didn't attract attention. I wasn't ready for reunions or declarations. I came only to observe, and I started with the school. From the parking lot across the street, I watched through the chain-link fence as Sophie and Michael emerged from their classroom. Sophie wore her hair in 2 braids, bouncing as she ran toward a woman waiting by the bench. Angela. She wasn't in heels or designer sunglasses, just a clean blouse, slacks, and worn-out sneakers. She looked ordinary. She looked tired. But most of all, she looked present. She knelt as the children approached. Michael offered a comic book he'd drawn himself, waving his arms in excitement. Sophie pointed at something behind the school, giggling. Angela took it all in with patience and curiosity, like she'd finally remembered how to be their mother. I leaned back in my seat, shielding my face behind the sun visor. I wasn't ready to speak, but I wanted to see. I needed to believe that her change wasn't performance. Back at the motel, I sat at the small desk and opened my laptop. A notification from Lena blinked in the corner. Angela, employment verification, Wake 5. Attendance, 100%. Punctuality, 100%. Counseling sessions attended, 5/5. Program feedback, cooperative, respectful, engaged. I stared at those numbers longer than necessary. There was something sacred about routine when it came from someone who had none before. My daughter, this version of her, was showing up, not for me, but for herself. And that mattered more than any apology ever could. The next morning, I sent her a letter, typed, this time, brief. Angela, I saw you with the children yesterday. They looked happy. Keep going. Mom. I didn't include an address or return phone number, just my signature at the bottom in pen. I left the envelope at Evelyn's and asked her to pass it along. She didn't press for details. We'd known each other too long for that. That same evening, Evelyn called. She cried when she read it, she said, but not like before. These were quiet tears, the kind you hold in for a long time until someone says something kind and everything bursts. 2 days later, the phone rang. It was Angela. Her voice trembled. I didn't expect the note. I didn't expect you to show up for 5 straight weeks. I'm trying, Mom. I see that. There was a silence. Can I see you? She asked. Not to talk about anything heavy. Just, I miss you. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because the ache of everything we hadn't said still hovered between us like dust in sunlight. There's a cafe on Thomas Road, I said. Noon. Tomorrow. She agreed. I arrived early. The place was small, nestled between a bookstore and a tailor's shop. It smelled like cinnamon and old wood. I chose a booth near the window and ordered 2 coffees, black, just like Robert used to drink. Angela arrived on time. That alone almost broke me. She walked in wearing a soft denim jacket and jeans that actually looked like they'd seen hard work. Her hair was pulled back simply, and she carried no designer purse, just a canvas tote bag, frayed at the edges. When she saw me, she smiled, but it wasn't the sugary, manipulative grin from months ago. This one was hesitant, uncertain, like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart." She slid into the seat across from me. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said, fingers curling around her cup. "I almost didn't," Angela nodded, accepting the truth. "I wanted to say something," she said. "Not about the money, not about what happened. Just thank you for not turning your back completely." I looked at her for a long moment. "You did that on your own. You climbed out. I just stepped aside. But you left a rope, even when I didn't deserve one." That caught me. It wasn't just what she said, it was the way she said it. No performative gratitude, no groveling, just quiet acknowledgement. I studied her face, the lines under her eyes, the tiredness etched deep into her skin, and I saw it buried beneath all the years of privilege and pretense a woman I'd once known, the girl I'd raised. We spoke for an hour, about the children, her job, the thrift store regulars who always had the best gossip. She told me about the teenager she was mentoring, a girl named Lily who'd aged out of foster care and reminded Angela of herself. "Only," she added with a faint smile, "Lily's smarter than I was. She asks for help, she listens." And then, before we parted, she said something that left me still for a long while. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mom, but I hope one day you'll be able to trust me again." Trust. It's such a fragile thing. Harder to build than love. Easier to lose than money. Slower to return than forgiveness. But in that cafe, on a warm October afternoon, something shifted. Not completely. Not enough to rewrite the past. But enough to begin again. That evening, back at the motel, I opened a drawer and took out the photo Angela had sent me during my first month at the cabin, the one from her wedding, where Robert had cried during the father-daughter dance. I studied his face, trying to imagine what he would say if he'd lived to see this moment. I like to believe he'd be proud, not because she'd changed, but because I finally had the courage to let her. The night after our cafe meeting, I sat by my motel window, blinds tilted just enough to watch the world go by. It was a quiet Thursday, the kind only October in Phoenix could deliver, warm enough to crack the window, cool enough to remember autumn was real somewhere. My phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn. "Check your email. Angela sent you something." I hadn't given Angela my email. Evelyn must have. I didn't mind. The message came with a subject line that stopped my breath. "For Mom, if you're still listening." It wasn't long, just a scanned letter, handwritten, same looping cursive from her childhood. She used to write thank you cards that way. This one said, "Mom, I never told you this, but I used to envy your strength. When Dad passed, when bills piled up, when people disappointed you, you never crumbled. I wanted to be like that, but I thought strength meant never needing anyone. I know now I had it wrong. Strength is knowing when to walk away. You did that, and you were right." I found the storage unit key in my purse. I hadn't touched it because I was afraid of who I used to be and what you might have saved in there. But I went today. There were things I didn't even remember, birthday cards, my high school debate trophy, a paper I wrote about heroes in the 6th grade. I said my hero was you, and I meant it. I hope one day you'll let me be that kind of strong for you. I didn't respond. I couldn't, not just yet. Instead, I printed the letter and slipped it between the pages of a book I'd brought from the cabin, The Gifts of Imperfection. It seemed appropriate. By the following week, Angela had added a 3rd job. She wasn't bragging about it. Evelyn mentioned it over coffee. Saturday mornings, cleaning houses. A church ladies group hired her to help elderly members. I raised an eyebrow. "Angela? Scrubbing bathtubs? On her knees with bleach and gloves," Evelyn said with a soft chuckle. She even brought fresh flowers to one widow's apartment. I exhaled. Not with satisfaction, but a kind of cautious peace. Change wasn't just happening, it was taking root. Still, I needed more. I needed to know the truth about the people who had once nearly cost me everything. So I visited an old friend, Detective Carl Jennings. Carl had retired 5 years ago, but he still played poker with the boys down at the lodge, and he never lost his instinct for trouble. We met at a quiet diner off 7th Street. 2 booths from the back, same one we used to sit in when we needed to talk without being overheard. "You're looking for something, aren't you?" Carl said after we ordered. "Something that'll make it easier to sleep at night." I nodded. "I want to know who my son-in-law really was dealing with. Names, faces, patterns. Carl tilted his head. You sure you want to dig that far? Sometimes closure ain't clean. I need facts. I'm building something. I need it to rest on truth, not memory. He nodded, chewing his toast thoughtfully. All right, I'll poke around. You'll owe me a whiskey or two. A week later, Carl called. You were right to walk away when you did, he said. Your boy-in-law was into deep water. Loans from a group tied to cartel operations out of Nevada. Not street thugs, men who clean their money through construction and golf courses. Did they come after him? They tried, but he skipped. Word is, he's in Costa Rica. New name, new girl, but no money. He's watching his back every hour. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel vengeance. I just felt empty. What about Angela? I asked. Was she ever tied up in it legally? No. He used her name, forged a few things, but nothing stuck. She didn't know everything, maybe not even half. That mattered. More than I realized. I thanked Carl and hung up, then sat in my car for nearly an hour watching the sun slide behind the strip mall's roofline. When I finally drove away, I knew what I needed to do next. 2 days later, I returned to the school. This time, I didn't stay hidden. I parked and walked inside, following the smell of cafeteria, pizza, and crayon wax until I reached the office. Mrs. Fields, the administrator, recognized me instantly. Mrs. Walker, she said, startled. It's been a while. I'd like to volunteer, I said. Reading sessions, math help, whatever the kids need. That afternoon, I read Where the Wild Things Are to Sophie's class. Her face when she saw me bright, stunned, then delighted was the first true light I'd felt in years. Michael ran up after class and hugged my legs. You came back, he whispered. I swallowed hard. I missed you both too much to stay away. Angela waited by the bench again. This time, when I approached, she stood, unsure. I'm not here to judge, I said. I'm here to be a grandma again. Her eyes filled, but she blinked it away. They've missed you. I have too. I touched her arm lightly. Then let's start small, like before. Bedtime stories, school projects. And maybe someday, she added, you'll let me help you back. We stood in silence. The three of us, Angela, the woman who had nearly broken me, myself, the woman who refused to be broken, and the children, the bridge between us both. That night, back at my apartment, I wrote a proposal. Financial independence for women, over 40, a community program. It was the beginning of something I hadn't dared imagine in years. Not just forgiveness, but purpose. Not just healing, but impact. And I knew exactly who I wanted to help me build it. Angela. Angela arrived at my apartment 10 minutes early, which surprised me more than I cared to admit. She stood at the threshold, holding a steaming paper bag and a cautious smile. Breakfast burritos, she said. Egg, potato, a little green chili. You always like that. I stepped aside to let her in, gesturing to the kitchen table. It was a simple apartment, 2 bedrooms, modest furniture, walls still half bare from the move. But it was mine. Mine in the way my old house, co-signed and half invaded, hadn't been in years. She placed the bag down gently and pulled out 2 wax-wrapped burritos. I thought maybe we could talk. I nodded. That's why I invited you. We sat across from each other, burritos in hand but untouched. There was something sacred in that silence, something new. I didn't rush it. For once, neither did she. I heard you've been helping at the school, she finally said. I nodded. They needed volunteers. I needed to feel useful. She smiled, and it was genuine. The kids haven't stopped talking about you. Sophie drew a picture of you reading to her class. Michael says you helped him fix a math problem. They're good kids, still bright, still kind. They haven't lost that. She looked down. I almost did that to them. You didn't, I said, gently but firmly. You made mistakes, Angela, big ones. But so did I. She looked up, surprised. I gave too much for too long. I thought love was saying yes. Turns out love is sometimes saying no and meaning it. She nodded slowly. I know that now. Mom, I know what I put you through, and what I let Derek do. I don't think I'll ever stop trying to make up for that. You won't have to, I said. You'll just have to keep being better. A pause. Then I reached into the folder beside me and slid it across the table. She opened it carefully. Her eyes scanned the first page. Financial Independence for Women Over 40, Curriculum Outline. She blinked. What is this? A program, I said. One I've been thinking about for a long time. Designed for women starting over, or who never really started at all. Angela looked at me, mouth slightly open. I want to pilot it here in Phoenix. Partner with a few community centers, maybe the local library. But I need someone to help me build it, someone who knows what it feels like to fall hard and get back up. You mean me? I mean you, I said. If you want it, it's not a favor. It's a job, training, workshops, commitment. It'll be hard, but it'll be yours. Her hands trembled slightly on the paper. You really think I could do this? I wouldn't offer it if I didn't. She leaned back, exhaling. This would mean quitting the diner. I know. I'd miss some paychecks. You'd be investing in something longer term. Her eyes flicked toward me. And you? What do you get out of it? I smiled softly. A legacy that's more than dollars and trust funds. A partner who understands the price of missteps and the value of second chances. We sat in quiet reflection for a moment. Then she reached across the table, not for the burrito, but for my hand. I'd be honored, she said, and terrified, but mostly honored. I squeezed her hand gently. We'll be scared together. That's the first rule of starting over. The next week was a blur of planning. Angela came over every night after work, flipping through binders, highlighting articles, scribbling notes. She stayed late, drank too much herbal tea, and once fell asleep on my couch with a highlighter in her hair. I watched her transform not just from a lost daughter into a student of life, but from a survivor into a builder. She emailed community directors, scheduled a meeting with the women's shelter, and even pitched our idea to her old manager at the furniture store, who offered to host our first workshop in the back room on Sundays. One night, after another long session, she lingered by the door. I saw a woman at the shelter today. She was my age, had 3 kids, escaped an abusive home with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes. She asked how I knew so much about credit scores and budgeting. I tilted my head. I told her I used to have everything and understood nothing, Angela said, and now I have less but know enough to want more the right way. I didn't speak, just hugged her. Our first workshop drew 14 women. One brought her sister. Another brought a notebook still stained from coffee spills and daycare markers. They came with questions, shame, hope. Angela stood in front of the whiteboard, nerves in her posture but fire in her voice. Financial freedom isn't about money, she began. It's about control, and today we start learning how to take it back. I stood in the back, heart swelling. Not with pride, with awe. This wasn't just healing. This was redemption. And it was only the beginning. It was Angela's idea to start the second workshop with a story. Not just any story, her story. I think I need to tell them, she said, the night before, as we sat together on my couch with mugs of chamomile tea. You sure? I asked, meeting her eyes. You don't owe anyone that. I owe it to myself, she said, to stop hiding behind who I used to be. And so, on a quiet Sunday morning in the back room of McLaren's furniture warehouse, amid folding chairs, dollar store pens, and the smell of sawdust and upholstery, my daughter stood before 16 women and told the truth. My name is Angela Harmon, she began, voice steady but low. A year ago, I lived in a 5-bedroom house I didn't own, drove a car I couldn't afford, and thought money was something that just appeared. She told them about Derek. Not the gritty details, but the betrayal, the lies, the debt, the fear, and most of all, the denial. I let my children's future be held hostage by a man who gambled away his own, she said, her voice cracking. And when I realized the truth, I tried to force my mother to fix it for me. She paused then, and I saw tears shimmer in her eyes. But she didn't break. She said no, Angela said. For the first time in my life, she said no. And that moment, what felt like abandonment, was the beginning of everything good. The room was silent. No coughs, no shuffling, just 16 women who saw themselves in the reflection of her ruin and her rebirth. Afterward, one of them, a retired nurse named Marcy, hugged Angela and whispered, "Thank you for not pretending." That afternoon, we stayed an hour past the scheduled end time. The women didn't want to leave. They asked about budgeting apps, how to open a checking account again after years without one, how to talk to their teenage kids about money. Angela answered every question patiently, Honestly, she didn't sound like a teacher. She sounded like someone who had just stepped out of the wreckage and was waving back to the others, saying, "This way, I made it." Back at my apartment, Angela sank into the recliner with a sigh. "Do you think I did okay?" I smiled. "You didn't do okay. You did real." She looked at the ceiling. "I never imagined I'd be here a year ago." I knew what she meant. Neither did I. The woman sitting across from me wasn't the same one who had screamed threats about loan sharks and thrown a glass of water in my face. That woman had been panicked, entitled, terrified. This woman had scars, but she wore them like medals. The days fell into a rhythm. Angela balanced the workshops, part-time shifts at the store, and time with the kids. We took turns picking them up from school. Michael wanted to show me his robotics kit. Sophie asked me to come to her ballet recital next month. Angela was trying. Not performing, not begging for redemption. Just trying. One night over dinner I asked, "Have you heard from Derek?" She shook her head. "Not since the divorce finalized. Last I heard, he was living with his brother in Denver, scamming someone new probably. You think he'll come back?" "If he does," she said with steel in her voice, "he'll find I'm not the same fool twice." Late March, Angela called me at 11:45 p.m. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice tight. "I'm listening. Tonight, after work, I stopped for gas. The kids were with Rachel. I was filling up, and someone walked up behind me, said my name. My stomach dropped. It was one of Derek's old friends, Rico. I recognized him from the photos your investigator gave you last year." "What did he say?" He asked where Derek was. Said he had unfinished business. And then he smiled, like he knew I had something he wanted. I was already grabbing my coat. "Did you call the police?" I did. Filed a report. I have the officer's card. But Mom, he knew where I worked, where I lived. I froze at the doorway. "You're coming here. Now." "No," she said firmly. "I've got the kids at Rachel's. We're safe. I didn't want to hide it from you." There was a pause. "Mom, if this comes back, if they come after me again..." "They won't," I said. "We'll make sure of that." The next morning, I was in my lawyer's office by 8. I handed him the name Rico and everything I remembered from the files. He listened, took notes, and finally said, "Time to go to the feds." "What?" "We hand them everything. The receipts, the surveillance, the financial trail. We tie Derek and his crew to Rico, and we give the authorities a reason to dig." My stomach twisted. "Do you think they'll do anything?" "They might," he said, "and even if they don't, we'll create a record, a paper trail, a warning." I looked out the window at downtown Phoenix, heat already rising off the asphalt. "I just want her safe." He nodded. "We'll protect her. We'll protect those kids." A week later, a federal agent sat at my dining table. Angela wasn't home. I didn't want her to relive any more than she already had. The agent, a quiet woman named Ramirez, reviewed the files I'd kept for over a year. Her expression never changed, but I saw something flicker in her eyes when she saw Derek's face in the Laughlin footage. "You've done a lot of the legwork for us," she said. "We've been watching that ring for months. This could help." She closed the folder. "But it means you and your daughter may be called to testify." "I understand." She looked at me, her expression softening. "Most people in your position would have just disappeared." "I tried that," I said. "Didn't work. Some ghosts don't stay buried unless you put them there yourself." That night, I didn't tell Angela everything. Not yet. But I watched her brush Sophie's hair, help Michael with his spelling homework, and clean up the dinner dishes without a sigh or complaint. She was tired but whole. For the first time in a long time, I believed we'd make it, even if the past came knocking. Because this time, we weren't running. We were ready. 2 weeks passed before we heard anything. Angela had returned to her routine: early shifts at the furniture store, late-night prep for upcoming workshops, and dinners that usually included boxed mac and cheese or whatever the diner handed out to closing staff. The anxiety lingered beneath her surface like a fault line, invisible but ready to quake at the wrong word, the wrong face at the gas station, the wrong envelope in the mail. I didn't blame her. Even I had begun to flinch at small things: unmarked vans slowing near the curb, wrong numbers that hung up after one ring, the glint of chrome that reminded me of Derek's old watch. And then the letter came. It was a thin, manila envelope, addressed in handwritten block letters. No return address. It arrived at Angela's apartment one quiet Thursday morning, tucked between a coupon book and a utility bill. She opened it while the kids were at school and called me immediately. "There's no threat," she said shakily. "But Mom, there's a picture inside." "What kind of picture?" "It's me, from yesterday, at the store, standing next to that old couple looking at headboards." I didn't speak for a long moment. "There's a note on the back," she added. "It says, 'We remember who you belong to.'" I was already grabbing my keys. "I'm coming over." "No," she said. "Meet me at the police station." She was learning. Fast. Officer Darrell, a calm, square-jawed man with more miles in his eyes than years on his badge, took our statement. He handled the photo with gloved fingers, placed it carefully into a bag, and typed quietly as Angela recounted the last few weeks. When she finished, he looked up. "You said you'd already spoken to a federal agent." "Ramirez?" "Yes," I answered. "She has the full file, surveillance, witness accounts, the financial trail." He nodded. "I'll follow up with her. In the meantime, Miss Harmon," he turned to Angela, "we strongly recommend you stay somewhere secure." "My mom's place," Angela said without hesitation. He looked at me. I nodded. "Already arranged." Angela reached for my hand under the table. Her fingers were cold and shaking. I squeezed them gently. "I'll put a watch on your apartment," Darrell continued. "Unmarked car. Routine checks. Let us know if anything else arrives." That night, she and the kids moved into my place. The twins didn't ask too many questions. We kept it simple, just said Mommy needed help for a while, and Grandpa's house had better cereal. Sophie was delighted by my pancake skills. Michael found my old chessboard and challenged me to a nightly match, which he won more often than not. But Angela, she barely slept. She paced after the kids went to bed, watched the blinds, double-checked the locks 3 times before midnight. Even the sound of the ice machine made her jump. "You don't have to be on alert every second," I said one night as we sat in the kitchen. "They're not getting through us." She looked at me, her eyes hollowed from exhaustion. "I'm not afraid for me, Mom. I'm afraid for them, for Sophie, for Michael." I reached across the table and touched her cheek. "Then we fight smart. We use every tool we've got." She exhaled shakily and nodded. "I want to go to court," she said quietly. "Not just testify. I want full custody, officially. I want every trace of Derek stripped from their lives. No more surprises." "Then that's what we do." I called Ramirez the next morning. She confirmed the letter's arrival was no coincidence. "We've been closing in," she said. "Derek made contact with someone tied to a laundering front in New Mexico. It's possible they're trying to intimidate you before the indictments drop." "So what do? We get ahead of it, and Miss Harmon gets her custody papers in order." It was a surreal blend of bureaucratic paperwork and raw emotion. Angela filled out custody petitions while folding Sophie's pajamas. I tracked down an attorney who specialized in parental safety orders. We gathered school records, bank statements, signed affidavits from neighbors and coworkers. At one point, I caught Angela sitting on the floor in my office, surrounded by paper, her hand pressed flat to a picture of the kids at Disneyland from 3 years ago. "I should have seen it sooner," she whispered. "What he was, what he could become." "You were surviving," I said gently. "You were trying to make love last longer than it should have." "I almost sold my children's safety," she said, choking on the words, "for a man who would have left us all in pieces." "You didn't," I said firmly. "You stepped away. You're here now. That's what matters." She nodded, slowly. "I want to testify. I want to stand in that courtroom and say, 'This is what he did, and this is what I won't let happen again.'" The trial date came faster than we expected. Federal prosecutors filed charges against Derek and 2 associates: fraud, extortion, money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud multiple individuals. Angela's testimony was requested as a primary witness to both the financial trail and the personal impact. It was a warm Monday morning in April when we walked into the courthouse. Angela wore a simple navy blue blouse and black slacks. No jewelry, no makeup, just clarity. In the hallway outside the courtroom, she took a deep breath. "I don't know if I can face him." "You already did," I said. "Last year, in my kitchen. This is just the final page." She walked in with her head high. Derek sat at the defense table, looking smaller than I remembered. No flashy watch, No smirk, just shadows under his eyes and a rumpled suit that didn't quite fit. When Angela took the stand, she didn't flinch. She told the story not of love turned sour, but of manipulation, fear, and awakening. She described the lies, the missing money, the constant promises that never held. And she described the moment she realized her children would be next. "I chose them over him," she said, voice steady. "And I'll choose them every single day, no matter the cost." Her words landed like hammers. Precise, personal, final. Derek didn't look up once. That night, back at my place, Angela sat on the deck with me as the kids slept inside. We watched the stars flicker over the Phoenix skyline. "It's over," she said quietly. "Almost. Do you think I'll ever stop looking over my shoulder?" I thought about it. "No. But you'll learn to look forward more often." She smiled, tired but genuine. "I used to think survival meant not drowning," she said. "Now I think it means learning how to swim." "Welcome to the deep end," I said, lifting my glass. We clinked quietly, and for the first time in months, we both exhaled long and slow into the night. By the end of April, the trial was over. Derek was found guilty on all counts. The sentence wouldn't be handed down until June, but the verdict itself felt like a thunderclap of relief. It echoed in every corner of our lives. Angela's face lightened for the first time in months. Sophie and Michael returned to full, unburdened laughter, and I, for the first time in years, slept through the night without waking up in a cold sweat. But peace was not the same as closure. Angela knew that. She didn't expect to feel triumphant, and she didn't. She simply felt quiet, not empty, just still, as if the storm had passed but left behind a landscape she no longer recognized. We were sitting on my porch one morning, sharing coffee and toast, when she finally said it aloud. "Mom, I want to move out." I took a breath. Not in surprise, I'd seen it coming, but in acknowledgement of what it meant. "You're ready," I said. She nodded. "I think so. The kids, they need their own space, their own routines again, and I need to prove I can do this. Not just survive, but rebuild." She pulled a folded flyer from her purse. A modest 2-bedroom apartment complex on the outskirts of Scottsdale. Safe neighborhood, close to the twins' school, affordable. "I visited yesterday," she added. "The manager said it's mine if I want it. I used some of my savings for the deposit." I couldn't stop the smile that curved at the corners of my mouth. "You didn't even ask me for help." She grinned, sheepishly. I thought about it. Then I thought, maybe this is the moment I stop asking and start earning. Moving day arrived 3 weeks later. It wasn't grand, just a rented U-Haul, a few friends from work, and a pile of secondhand furniture she'd bargained for on Facebook Marketplace. I helped pack boxes. Sophie labeled each one with meticulous handwriting. Books, toys, mommy's stuff. Michael oversaw the loading process like a miniature general, clipboard in hand, checking items off one by one. Angela moved with quiet determination. She was thinner now, not in a hollow way, but in the wiry, capable way of someone who carried her own weight, and then some. Her hair was tied back in a no-nonsense bun, her hands steady. As we loaded the final box, she paused and turned to me. "Mom," she said, her voice low, "I want you to have something." She handed me a manila envelope. Inside, a single sheet. A notarized letter transferring full ownership of the house back to me, the one she had once claimed as her own in a moment of entitlement and desperation. "I know you technically never gave it up," she said, "but now it's official. No strings, no confusion." "Angela, I know, that's the point. You never held it over me, and I'll never forget that." She invited me over the first Friday in her new apartment. Dinner was homemade chicken pot pie, her first attempt, and despite the slightly burnt crust, it was delicious. The table was wobbly, the plates mismatched, and the kitchen window was propped open with a wooden spoon. But there was warmth, there was laughter. There was music from an old radio on the counter playing soft country tunes. "This is home," she said, as we sipped tea afterward. "Not because it's perfect, but because I built it." I looked around. Picture frames lined the windowsill, Sophie at ballet, Michael with his robotics team, Angela holding a hammer during a furniture-building workshop. "You've done more than build a home," I said. "You've reclaimed your life." She looked down at her tea, then back up at me. "It wouldn't have happened without you." "You're wrong," I said gently. I gave you space. You chose to grow in it. Summer crept in with Phoenix's usual intensity, dry heat that pressed against the skin, long days that stretched into golden evenings. Angela kept working both jobs. She started training new employees at the store, mentoring women who reminded her of her former self. The diner shifts became less frequent, but she kept 2 a week. Humility, she explained, when I asked why she didn't quit altogether. I need to remember where I came from. And besides, I like the night crowd. It's honest. She began writing again, in journals and on her laptop. Stories, mostly about healing, about family, about finding dignity in unexpected places. I read one, once, when she left it on the coffee table. It was raw, beautiful, and filled with lines that cracked me open. Pain taught me that love isn't a loan, it's a gift, given freely or not at all. The twins flourished. Sophie was selected for a lead role in her ballet recital. Michael was accepted into an advanced STEM program, and his excitement was contagious. They talked about school, dreams, and even asked if Grandpa could teach them how to garden. So I did. Every Saturday morning, we planted tomatoes and carrots in ceramic pots on Angela's balcony. It became our ritual coffee for me, juice boxes for them, dirt under our fingernails. "This is our secret farm," Sophie whispered one morning, pressing a bean seed into soil. "No one can ruin it." I felt my throat tighten. "No, sweetheart," I said. "No one ever will." One Sunday in late August, Angela brought out a worn wooden box, the same one I hadn't seen since she was a child. Inside were mementos, old birthday cards, her high school yearbook, a few photos of her and her mom, and at the very bottom, the letter she'd written to me from the diner at 3 a.m., months earlier. "I reread it sometimes," she said softly, "to remind myself how far I've come." She handed me a new envelope. "And now I've written something else. For you." I unfolded the paper, heart already swelling. It wasn't a letter of thanks. It wasn't an apology. It was a proposal. A detailed outline for a nonprofit organization, the Phoenix Nest, designed to support women recovering from financial trauma, abusive relationships, and family betrayal. Counseling, job training, financial literacy, support groups. "I want to make sure no one else feels as alone as I did," she said. "I want to be the person I needed a year ago." I looked at her, the daughter I had feared I'd lost, and saw a woman forged by fire, but unburned. "We'll do it together," I said. And for the first time since the ordeal began, she didn't cry. She simply smiled, steady, sure. The Phoenix Nest launched in October, quietly, but with intention. Angela and I worked side by side in a borrowed community center room just west of downtown Phoenix. The space smelled faintly of Lysol and old carpet, the linoleum floors were scuffed, and the flickering fluorescent lights hummed overhead, but none of that mattered. What mattered were the folding chairs filled with women. Some in business attire, some in scrubs, others in jeans and oversized sweatshirts. All of them carried something heavy. Angela stood at the front of the room that first night, her voice low but unwavering. "We're not here to fix anyone," she said. "We're here to remind each other that we're not broken." There was silence, the kind that follows something honest. Then one woman, middle-aged, gray at the temples, spoke up. "No one's ever said that to me before." That was the beginning. We structured the nest around 3 pillars: financial literacy, emotional support, and practical tools. I taught the budgeting classes, drawing from a lifetime of running businesses and balancing accounts. Angela led the storytelling workshops, helping women give language to pain that had long lived unnamed. She became magnetic, not performative, not loud, but present, rooted. When she spoke, people listened. When she cried, others followed. Her vulnerability didn't make her weak, it made her trustworthy. One woman, Sheila, came to every meeting for a month before saying a word. Then one Tuesday, she lingered after class and whispered, "Your story is mine. I just haven't lived the ending yet." Angela hugged her. Not out of pity, but out of recognition. Outside the workshops, life continued at its own pace. Angela's second job at the diner quietly came to an end. Not because she couldn't do it, but because she finally didn't need to. Her hours at the furniture store increased, and they offered her a position in corporate training, weekends off, full benefits. "It feels too good," she confessed one evening, like the other shoe's going to drop. I understood. Trauma teaches you to brace for pain. Even in peace, you flinch. Then let yourself be surprised by stability, I told her. Let it feel strange, and let it stay. The kids adjusted faster than any of us. Children have an extraordinary ability to reroute, especially when love remains consistent. Michael's robotics team won their regional competition. Sophie performed in her recital with the grace of someone much older. They made macaroni art for my fridge, drew stars next to my name in sidewalk chalk. Every Sunday, they came to my house for dinner, and we watched old movies or worked in the garden. Tomato vines climbed higher each week, stubborn and sweet. One evening, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she asked, "Grandpa, is this what happy looks like?" I paused. "Yes," I said. "It looks exactly like this." By December, the Phoenix Nest had outgrown its humble beginnings. We partnered with a local nonprofit to access a larger facility, a renovated library with breakout rooms and a small kitchen. Angela stood in the empty space before opening night, hands in her jacket pockets, eyes scanning the new horizon. "It's really happening," she whispered. I nodded. "Because you made it happen." "No," she said, turning to me. "Because you didn't give up on me." We didn't dwell on Derek anymore. He'd been sentenced to 12 years, no possibility of parole for the first 7. Occasionally, letters arrived desperate, bitter, manipulative. Angela never opened them. She stored them in a box labeled "Closure," taped shut and placed in the back of her closet. Once, she told me she'd read them someday. Maybe, but not until his words held no weight. 1 week before Christmas, Angela gave me a gift wrapped in brown paper and twine. Inside, a hardcover book. The title was embossed in gold, "Built from Ashes, Stories of the Women Who Rose." It was a collection of essays written by participants of the Phoenix Nest. Raw, beautiful, aching stories of loss, debt, betrayal, and survival. Angela had edited every piece, written the foreword, and paid for the first printing herself. "You're in the dedication," she said, eyes shimmering. "Page 1. I opened it. To my mother, who saved me by stepping back. To my children, who gave me something worth becoming. To every woman who thought she was alone, you're not." My throat tightened. I couldn't speak for a long moment. Angela didn't fill the silence. She knew what it meant. That Christmas, we didn't have a grand feast. No marble countertops or catered turkeys. Just a pot of chili, cornbread from a box, and laughter echoing through Angela's small apartment. Sophie had made a construction paper star for the top of their hand-me-down tree. Michael gave me a keychain shaped like a wrench. "For when stuff breaks, Grandpa." Angela handed me a card. No money inside. Just a note. "Mom, I finally learned what you meant all those years when you said, 'Love means doing hard things.' It means holding firm when it would be easier to give in. It means watching someone fall because you believe they'll rise. Thank you for not saving me so I could learn how to save myself. Love, Angela." I folded the card carefully, placed it in my wallet, behind my driver's license, where I'd keep it always. That night, as the city lights blinked beyond the balcony, Angela leaned against the railing beside me. "Do you think she'd be proud?" she asked softly. She didn't have to say who. I looked up at the stars. "Your mother would be in awe." As the year drew to a close, I found myself reflecting not on what we'd lost, but what we'd found. Dignity, agency, forgiveness. Angela was no longer the woman who threw water in my face or used her children as bargaining chips. She was a mother, a mentor, a builder of broken things. And I, once only a provider, had become a witness to something greater than I'd imagined, the rebirth of a soul not just surviving, but thriving. Angela's second year of rebuilding began not with fireworks, but with quiet, a kind of peace that only follows after long chaos. January came with rain, rare for Phoenix. The streets glistened in the morning light, and the scent of wet asphalt drifted through the air like a promise of something clean. I remember watching the water bead on my kitchen window as I sipped my coffee, the same mug I'd had for years, the one with the faded Haitian Mom logo that Angela had given me when she was 9. I hadn't used it since before everything fell apart. That morning, I chose it deliberately. Angela called just before 8 a.m. "We got the grant," she said, barely breathing between words. "The community fund, we got it." I didn't need to ask which grant. We'd applied in November, a proposal she drafted by herself, a plan to offer financial literacy workshops to low-income high school seniors and newly released women from county corrections. It wasn't just about money. It was about choices, about rewriting the narrative before it was too late. They gave us the full $20,000, she added, voice trembling. That's because they saw what I see, I said. Someone who's not just surviving, but leading. The next few weeks blurred with activity. Angela onboarded 2 part-time staffers and began coordinating with schools and reentry programs. She met with teachers, parole officers, church leaders, anyone who would listen. Her voice, once brittle with pride, now carried conviction. One Friday afternoon, I sat in the back of her classroom as she spoke to a group of seniors at Edison High. She wore a blazer from a thrift store and a simple gold necklace, her mother's. "Raise your hand if anyone's ever taught you how to make a budget," she said. 3 hands out of 25 went up. "Raise your hand if anyone's warned you about predatory loans." No hands. She didn't shame them. She didn't scold. She shared a story, part hers, part ours, about what happens when money controls you instead of the other way around. About how bad decisions aren't the end of your story unless you stop writing. A boy in the back, maybe 17, leaned forward on his desk. "So you were rich and then broke, and now you're, what? Fixed?" Angela smiled, not insulted. "I'm still learning, but I'm no longer broken." Later that evening, we sat on her apartment balcony, legs wrapped in thrifted blankets, sipping hot tea. "Sometimes I feel like I'm impersonating the person I want to be," she admitted. "That's how it starts," I said. "You fake stability until it becomes real." She looked down at the city, glittering lights stretching far past what we could name. "Do you ever miss her?" she asked, not meeting my eyes. "Her mother. Every day," I said. "But not in the way that makes me sad. More like, I carry her with me." Angela nodded slowly. "I wish she could see this. Not the organization or the apartment. Just me. Trying." She sees. February brought a visitor we hadn't anticipated. I was returning home from the grocery store, eggs, broccoli, and the vanilla cookies Michael loved when a car I didn't recognize sat idling outside my house. A woman stepped out. Mid, 40s, tall, elegant, in a way that looked natural. Her posture was familiar. Her eyes, too. "You must be her mother," she said. I hesitated. "Depends on who her is." "I'm Derek's sister, Laura." It was like ice water down my back. I hadn't heard that name Derek in over a year, and I hadn't wanted to. Not since his sentencing. "I don't think we have anything to discuss," I said, my voice cold. She held up her hands. "I'm not here for a fight. I didn't know the extent of what he'd done until after he was arrested. Angela never responded to my letters. I wanted to see how she was, how the kids are. I considered slamming the door in her face. But something in her eyes stopped me. Regret, maybe, or exhaustion. "She's not ready to see you," I said. Laura nodded. "Could you give her this?" She held out an envelope. "If not, I'll understand." I took it reluctantly. She turned to leave, then paused. "I always thought I was the strong sibling," she said, almost to herself. "Turns out I just never had to face my own reflection." Angela read the letter 3 days later, quietly, alone, at the end of our workshop cleanup shift. She didn't cry. She didn't speak for a long time. "She says she's in therapy," Angela finally murmured. "Trying to understand what made Derek the way he is, and what she ignored for too long." "You don't have to respond," I said. "I might," she replied, "but not today." And that was enough. By spring, Angela had become a quiet force in the community. The Phoenix Nest now served over 60 women a month. She trained volunteers, mentored a group of teen girls, and was asked to speak at a statewide conference on financial equity. She declined the keynote. "I'm not ready," she told me. "You're already doing the work," I said. "You don't have to announce it to the world to prove it's real." Still, I could see the seed had been planted. April came, and with it, Sophie's 9th birthday. We celebrated in my backyard, paper streamers, folding tables, and a bounce house rented for the afternoon. Angela baked the cake herself, chocolate with pink frosting and edible glitter, the kind of messy, joyful sweetness only a child could request. At one point, as I wiped icing from Sophie's nose, Angela leaned over and whispered, "Do you think this is what she meant by legacy?" "Who?" I asked. "Mom." I looked around at the people, gathered neighbors, volunteers, old friends we hadn't seen in years, laughter, music, the smell of barbecue. "I think this is what she prayed for every night," I said. Angela nodded, eyes misty but smiling. "Then let's not waste it." As dusk settled over the party, I sat on the porch, watching the last of the kids chase each other through the yard. Angela came beside me, holding a cup of lemonade. "You know," she said, "I never thanked you properly. For what you did. Walking away. Letting me fall." I looked at her, no pity, just pride. "You didn't fall. You found a foundation." She took a deep breath, looking out at her children, the women she'd helped, the life she'd built. "Chapter 14, she said. "What?" "That's what this feels like. Not the end, not even the middle, just Chapter 14. And we both laughed, because it was true. There are moments that arrive without fanfare, no announcements or fireworks, yet shift the course of everything. For me, one of those moments came on a Wednesday in late May. Angela knocked on my door, early, before sunrise. I knew it was her from the rhythm: 2 knocks, pause, 1 more. She used to do that as a child when she wanted to come into our room after a nightmare. When I opened the door, she wasn't crying, she wasn't frantic, she was simply still. "I think I'm ready," she said. "For the keynote." We stood there in the soft blue of morning. I nodded slowly. "Then it's time." The Arizona Women's Leadership Summit was held at a modest conference center downtown. Nothing flashy, just rows of chairs, a basic stage, and a banner printed with "Voices of Change." Angela stood backstage, holding her note cards like they were lifelines. "I'm not doing this to prove anything," she whispered. "I'm doing this because I owe it to the women in the back row." "You don't owe anyone," I said. She gave me a knowing smile. "Then I'll do it for the ones still in silence. The ones who haven't walked away yet." They called her name. Applause. She walked to the podium with a kind of grace I hadn't seen in her before. Not polished, not rehearsed, but earned. And then she spoke. "My name is Angela Hart," she began. "I was once a woman who believed love could fix addiction. That loyalty meant silence. That money was the solution to every storm." A hush fell over the room. I watched my life unravel while I smiled through parties, hid bills in handbags, and begged my mother to fix the damage I didn't want to face. Her voice didn't tremble. She didn't dramatize. She simply laid the truth down, piece by piece, like bricks for a path others could walk. "There was a moment," she said, "when I threatened my own mother, the woman who raised me, in defense of a man who would have sold our children's futures for one more bet." Gasps in the audience. No one looked away. She walked away, and in doing so, she gave me the one thing I never knew I needed: consequences. She paused, then smiled, sad, honest. "I'm not here to tell you I'm healed. Healing is not a destination, it's a discipline. Every day I choose not to be the woman I was. Every day I choose the mother, the leader, the daughter I want to become." When she finished, the standing ovation wasn't polite, it was visceral, real. Women cried openly. A line formed after the event. Dozens waited just to say thank you. But the most powerful part came later. A teenage girl, maybe 15, approached Angela with shaking hands. "My dad's like your husband," she whispered. "Nobody believes me." Angela kneeled, looked the girl in the eyes, and said, "I believe you, and you're not alone." The story ran in the Arizona Republic the next day. From crisis to catalyst, Angela Hart's journey. They printed her entire speech. For the first time in years, our family name stood for something other than scandal. Carlos framed the article and hung it in the dealership office beside the awards. "Your family," he told me, "is the reason I believe in second chapters." Later that summer, the Phoenix Nest received a federal grant to expand statewide. Angela asked me to join the board. "I need your experience," she said. "Your voice. You've got your own now," I replied. She squeezed my hand. "Then sit next to me. Let's make sure no one drowns in silence again." One afternoon, while sorting through donations at the Nest, Angela found a box marked MISC. Inside were journals, some half-filled, others brand new. She handed one to me. "Start writing," she said. "What would I write about?" "Everything you never said, everything you did." So I wrote. At first, just a page or two. Then full chapters about my wife, about the day I left, about the envelope, about how it hurt more to walk away than it did to give money. I didn't know I needed to tell my story too, until I started. That fall, Angela was invited to speak at a national conference in Chicago. She insisted on flying coach, refused the hotel upgrade, packed leftovers from our fridge for the trip. "You're not poor anymore," I joked. "I'm just not careless," she replied. But when she came home, she brought something unexpected. A manuscript. "I started writing too," she said, cheeks flushed. "What is it?" "Our story. Well, mine, but yours too." The working title was scrawled in ink: Inheritance, a daughter's debt, and a mother's grace. I flipped through the pages. Her voice was strong, personal, vulnerable. It wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption, legacy. She looked at me, uncertain. "Too much?" "It's perfect," I said. November brought cool evenings and early twilights. We hosted Thanksgiving again, this time in Angela's new rental, a modest 2-bedroom near the children's school. Michael had made name cards for each guest. Sophie baked pumpkin bread. As we passed dishes and laughter around the table, I glanced at Angela. She caught me looking. "What?" "I was just thinking about the first Thanksgiving," I said. She laughed softly. "The one on the floor? You've come far." Her expression turned serious. "So have you." Later that night, I sat alone in the guest room, flipping through her manuscript. A line near the end stopped me. I didn't need my mother to save me. I needed her to believe I could save myself. I closed the manuscript and stared at the ceiling. Sometimes, the hardest part of being a parent isn't holding on, it's letting go. But letting go doesn't mean vanishing. It means believing they'll rise. It was a Tuesday morning when I received the letter from Derek's lawyer. Not a phone call, not an email, a letter. Heavy cream stock with a stiff, practiced signature like it mattered more how it looked than what it said. Angela had listed our P.O. box as her legal contact during the divorce proceedings. She'd done it as a way of buffering herself. She wasn't ready to face Derek again, not directly, and she trusted me to filter the venom. I opened the envelope with a butter knife, more curious than afraid. I didn't expect what I found. Derek was suing Angela. The charges were laughable: defamation of character, emotional distress, intentional sabotage of professional reputation. He claimed the prenuptial agreement was coercive, that Angela had, quote, conspired with a third party, May, to create a fraudulent impression of his gambling debt. There were even screenshots edited, doctored, designed to frame Angela as vindictive. I stared at the pages, rage slow burning in my chest. This man, this parasite, was still trying to sink his claws into a woman who had finally stood up. Not for money this time, for spite. Angela was in a morning planning meeting at the Nest. I waited until she came home for lunch. She breezed in, balancing a tote full of workshop materials and a smoothie, humming something soft under her breath. She was peaceful, at ease. I didn't want to break that, but I had to. "There's something you need to see," I said, laying the papers on the kitchen island. Her humming stopped. She set her smoothie down. "Is it Derek?" I nodded. She read in silence. Her lips thinned, her breath slowed. When she finished, she folded the letter once, then again, and placed it aside like it was a grocery flyer. "He's scared," she said simply. "Of what?" "Of being forgotten." The answer caught me off guard. "He doesn't want money." "Not really. He wants to pull me back into his story, make himself relevant again." "He can't be allowed to do this," I said. Angela looked at me, calm and clear-eyed. "He won't." Angela's lawyer was a woman named Carmen Lee. In her mid-40s, with salt and pepper streaks in her tightly coiled hair, she exuded the kind of composed confidence that came from surviving 3 decades in family court. When Carmen read Derek's complaint, she let out a single, sharp laugh. "This is amateur hour," she said. "A stall tactic. He's trying to delay final judgment on the asset division." Angela nodded. "Can we fight it?" "We don't fight it," Carmen said. "We end it permanently." It turned out that Derek's own legal team had a habit of forgetting small things, like updated tax returns, or itemized accounts, or the glaring discrepancy between his claimed income and the surveillance footage of him buying chips at casinos. Carmen built a case like a surgeon, precise, bloodless. She didn't play defense, she hunted. The court date was set for late October. Angela didn't want to go. "I don't want to be in the same room as him again," she admitted. "You won't have to," Carmen reassured. "We'll request a virtual appearance. He'll be in Denver. You'll be here. You'll have me. And your mom." I smiled. The morning of the hearing, Angela wore no makeup. She pulled her hair back in a braid, wore a navy blouse with sleeves rolled at the elbows. Not a woman in battle armor, a woman grounded in truth. The judge appeared on screen, a lean man with tired eyes and a no-nonsense tone. Derek, visible from a stiff video feed, wore a suit he clearly hadn't had tailored. He looked smaller than I remembered, almost boyish, pale, jittery. When the judge asked for opening remarks, Carmen stood. "Your Honor, my client has no intention of dignifying Mr. N. Langford's claims with an extended counter-narrative. We will, however, present the following: documentation of his ongoing gambling activity, signed admissions of debt, a copy of the prenuptial agreement initialed on each page, and notarized statements from financial institutions verifying our claims." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look smug. She just told the truth. The judge reviewed the materials. Derek tried to interrupt twice. He was muted both times. In the end, the judge issued a decisive dismissal. With prejudice, Derek's complaint was thrown out, and he was warned not to pursue further litigation without substantial new evidence. Angela exhaled deeply. I think it was the first time in a year that she truly believed he couldn't touch her anymore. We celebrated with grilled cheese and tomato soup at her place. Simple, cozy. The kids were with their friends. It was just us. "He's out of my life," Angela said, staring into her bowl. I didn't reply. She looked up. "You believe that, right?" I paused, then said, "I believe he can't hurt you anymore, and that's enough." The following week, Angela submitted her manuscript to 3 publishers. 2 rejected her. 1 asked for a meeting. By mid-November, she had a book deal. "I thought it would scare me," she confessed, "putting my story out there, but I think I'm finally more afraid of staying silent than speaking up." "I'm proud of you," I said. She smiled. "I'm proud of me too." Thanksgiving came again. This time, it was at my house. I cooked. She brought the kids. We invited Carmen and Carlos and a few friends from the nest. It was full, loud, alive. After dinner, Sophie climbed into my lap and whispered, "Grandpa, I'm thankful for second chances." I swallowed hard. "Me too, sweetheart," I said. "Me too. Winter in Arizona doesn't bring snow, but there's a softness to it all the same. The sun hangs lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the sidewalks. People slow down. The air carries a quiet peace. It was during one of those dusky afternoons that Angela received the call that would change everything again. I was over at her apartment, helping the twins with their science fair projects. Sophie's model of the solar system dangled from the ceiling with fishing line, and Michael's water filtration prototype had already flooded the kitchen once that week. Angela had stepped out to take a call on the balcony, and when she came back in, her face was pale but focused. "That was Marianne Weiss," she said. I blinked. "The Marianne Weiss?" Angela nodded. "Editor-in-chief at Horizon House Publishing." She read my manuscript. I stood up, the twins looking between us like they'd missed something important. "What did she say?" "She wants me to come to New York next week. To speak. At a summit on financial trauma and recovery. She wants me to tell me my story." She was trembling not from fear, but from the sheer weight of it all. "It's happening," she whispered. The days before the summit passed in a flurry. Carmen helped her prepare a statement. Carlos ran her slide deck. I helped the kids make little good luck cards and tucked an old handkerchief of their grandmother's into Angela's suitcase, embroidered with lilacs, her favorite. She boarded that flight with a carry-on, a borrowed blazer, and the heaviest truth she'd ever dared carry into the open. I watched her go through security alone, her silhouette smaller than I remembered, yet somehow larger than ever before. The Summit Hall in Manhattan was packed nonprofit leaders, educators, survivors, advocates. Angela was slotted right after a panel on predatory lending. She was nervous, but composed. She stepped up to the mic without a script. Just a photo projected behind her wedding day, mid-father-daughter dance. the moment I had teared up. She took a breath. My name is Angela Martin. I used to believe that money was love, that the people who gave me the most loved me the most, and that I only had value if I could get more. I was wrong. What followed was 20 minutes of unflinching honesty. She spoke about the $500,000 demand, the threats, the guilt, about the moment she saw her own reflection in the man she'd married and hated what looked back. She spoke about me, not by name, just as her mother, her line of defense, her mirror. She didn't cry. But the audience did. When she stepped down, the room stood with her. The response was immediate. Emails, offers, podcasts, panels. The publishing deal became national. Her story, a blend of memoir, financial literacy, and redemption titled Without Price, was slated for release in 6 months. But it wasn't the book that changed her most. It was what she decided to do with it. "I want to build something," she told me one night as we sat on my porch, blankets across our laps. "Not just a program, a whole foundation." We brainstormed names. She settled on Earned Worth. Its mission: teaching financial self-defense, especially to women and youth from underserved communities. Budgeting, boundaries, dignity. She'd live modestly. Her new speaking income went largely to the foundation. She kept the Civic, kept the studio apartment for a while, too. "Every day I wake up in this place," she said. "I remember what I climbed out of." That spring, she was invited to give a TED Talk. Her kids watched from the front row. I watched from the wings. Derek, somewhere in Colorado or Kansas, was now just a shadow in her rearview mirror. The day her book hit the shelves, we walked into a local bookstore just to see it. The clerk had no idea who she was. "That's me," Angela said softly, touching the cover. But not who I was. At dinner one Sunday, Michael asked, "Mom, are you famous now?" Angela laughed. "Only to people who care about learning from their mistakes." Sophie chimed in, "I think you're cool. Like, superhero cool." Angela smiled and looked at me. That's all I ever wanted. The program at the Nest expanded. Angela trained 5 new facilitators. The local school district adopted her curriculum. She was invited to Washington for a White House roundtable. CNN ran a special. Her TED Talk hit 1 million views. She never stopped working the Tuesday evening shift at the diner. "It keeps me honest," she said. I knew what she meant. Some roots need to stay in the dirt to keep the tree growing straight. Angela's second book, Inheritance of Silence, explored generational shame around money and self-worth. She dedicated it to her children and to her mother, to the woman who gave me everything except the ability to give up. I cried when I read it. On the third Thanksgiving after everything, we didn't sit at a folding table. Angela had moved into a small house she bought herself. It wasn't grand, but it was full of light. The yard had a swing for the kids and a garden bed with herbs she never remembered to water. We sat down to a meal made from scratch. No one brought takeout. No one asked for anything. We went around the table saying what we were grateful for. When it came to Angela, she paused. "I'm grateful," she said, "for the no's that saved me, for the silence that made me listen, and for the chance to build a life I'm not ashamed of." The room was quiet. Then I raised my glass. To the kind of wealth that can't be spent. The clink of glass on glass echoed softly. And I thought this, finally, was peace. They say the past never really leaves us. It just folds itself into our bones, reshaped by time and truth. As I sat in the auditorium of Desert Hills Academy, watching my grandchildren walk across the stage in caps and gowns, I felt the weight of every choice, every silence, every no, every heartbreak settle into something resembling grace. Sophie waved at us with both hands, her tassel swinging wildly. Michael gave a small nod, serious as ever, but I saw the pride in his eyes. Angela was sitting beside me, her fingers laced tightly in her lap, a soft tear streaking down one cheek. She wore a navy blue suit, understated but strong. Her wedding ring had long since vanished, replaced by a slender silver band on her right hand, just a circle of commitment to herself. After the ceremony, families swarmed the courtyard. Balloons bobbed in the breeze. Teachers posed for photos. Angela crouched down to hug both twins at once. "You did it," she whispered. "No, we did it," Sophie corrected. "All of us." That night, we returned to her home. Not the tiny studio apartment, not the place above the dry cleaner. This was a 2-bedroom cottage in a quiet Mesa neighborhood, bought outright from years of hard-earned, well-managed savings. The backyard smelled of rosemary and grilled chicken. Mason jars filled with sweet tea clinked in hands. A small banner stretched across the porch. "Congratulations, class of 2030. Angela handed me a worn envelope. Inside was the same savings bond I had once tucked away in that storage unit. "It matured," she said, "but I don't need it. I want you to donate it to a shelter, to single mothers trying to break out of the cycle I lived in." I looked at her. "Are you sure?" She nodded. It was never about the money. It was about what I had to become to no longer need it. In July, the first branch of Earned Worth opened in Houston, followed by another in Detroit. Angela trained every staff member personally. She insisted that each location partner with local community groups, food banks, clinics, schools. Financial literacy, she said in her keynote, is not just about dollars. It's about dignity. It's about giving people the words and tools to rewrite their stories. She received awards, a segment on 60 Minutes, an honorary doctorate. People asked her how she turned her life around. She never blamed Derek, never blamed me. She said, "I had to meet myself at rock bottom and decide to climb." Michael went on to study engineering at Arizona State. Sophie chose sociology, aiming to work with trauma survivors. They still called me every Sunday night, even from dorms. Angela visited me at the cabin in Montana each summer. Just the two of us, coffee on the porch, long walks by the lake, fishing even though she rarely caught anything. Once, on one of those mornings, she said, "You know what I've realized?" I raised an eyebrow. "What?" "I used to think your silence was punishment, that you disappearing was you giving up on me." She looked out over the water, sun spilling across its glassy surface. "But it wasn't that. You were giving me back to myself, and that was the most terrifying, merciful thing you could have done." I said nothing, just reached over, and she squeezed my hand. Years passed. Life did what life always does. It shifted. I slowed down. Angela built more than a foundation. She built a legacy. When I eventually moved out of my old home, Angela came to help sort boxes. In the attic, she found the original folder, the one I had left on the porch that day. The deed, the receipts, the photos, the texts. She looked at me and said, "Can I burn it?" I nodded. "It's yours to do with." That night, we lit a small fire pit behind her house. The flames danced. She fed in the pages, one at a time, letting go of every version of herself that no longer served her. When the fire turned to embers, she said, "I forgive her." I asked, "Who?" "The girl I used to be." The last chapter of this story doesn't end with applause or awards. It ends with Angela sitting beside me in a church hall, years later, as she watches Sophie teach her own financial workshop to young women. Angela leaned in and whispered, "She's better than I ever was." I smiled. "She had a good teacher." "No," Angela said, eyes misty. "She had a good mother." This isn't a tale of revenge. It's not even just a tale of redemption. It's a reminder that sometimes the best way to protect those we love isn't to catch them when they fall. It's to let them fall far enough to realize they can stand on their own. And when they finally do, to be there not with money, not with rescue, but with respect, the kind that's earned, the kind that lasts. Sometimes love means stepping back, not stepping in. True transformation doesn't come from handouts, it comes from hardship, humility, and hard work. In choosing silence over enabling, this mother gave her daughter the space to fall, to break, and ultimately to rise. The greatest gift a parent can give isn't money or protection. It's the opportunity for their child to earn their own self-respect and rebuild a life rooted in truth, not entitlement. Because dignity, once reclaimed, is worth more than any check ever written.